Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this book launch of Farzana's first collection of poems. You still look the same. We are very happy to be launching this book for Farzana, who is an old friend of the University of Mumbai, of the Indo-Canadian Studies Centre, and now our newly rebranded Mumbai Münster Institute of Advanced Studies, which is a collaborative effort between the universities of Mumbai and Münster. So we are very happy to have Farzana's book being the Indian edition of her book being launched today on our platform. We have also had the pleasure of meeting Farzana and also her sister some years back, when the good old days when we met one another in flesh and blood rather in virtual terms. So those were the good old days, and we had met Farzana and she had done a reading from her then newly released one of her novels, I forget which one. And we have had one of my PhD students working on Farzana's works, and she is on the Zoom platform today. Melanie is here, and we hear from Sachin Labde, my colleague, who will be interviewing Farzana later on, that yet another student of ours is working on Farzana's text. So we are very happy to be re-welcoming Farzana back, in a manner of speaking, to the University of Mumbai, and now also the University of Münster, which is our collaborative partner. The session today is being chaired. We are very fortunate that we have Professor Sridhar Rajeswaran to chair the session today, because he's not just an academic, he's also a poet, a published poet, and we requested him to step in because of a personal tragedy which overtook the earlier chair, unfortunately. So Sridhar has very kindly agreed to step in and take care of the session today. Before I hand over the session to Sridhar, I shall be introducing him, and then the entire thing is Sridhar's responsibility. Professor Dr. Sridhar Rajeswaran is the founder director of the Center for Advanced Studies in India, ICSE. He is visiting faculty at the University of Münster, Germany. He was the professor and head of English department and dean of the Faculty of Arts at the KSKD Kutch University in Gujarat. He was a South Asian Diaspora Fund Fellow of the Indo-Canadian Centre at the University of Mumbai and the University of the Fraser Valley, British Columbia, Canada. Sridhar is writing a book on Deepa Mehta's cinema. He has also been a DAAD, German Academic Exchange Service visiting professor in post-colonial theories, Indian literature, and Bollywood cinema at the universities of Münster, Düsseldorf, Cologne, and Bonn. He is published and edited widely in India and abroad. He's also the co-editor of the Diaspora Studies series of the MMIAS, the Mumbai Münster Institute of Advanced Studies, the University of Mumbai. He is himself, as I've said, a creative writer whose plays have been broadcast over the All India Radio and read at professional theatres in Mumbai. His poetry has been published in national and international journals. He has published a collection of his poems called Cracked Images, Frozen Frames. He's been a poet in residence at the University of Düsseldorf in Germany and has been invited to read his poems at the London Book Fair and Kitab and other book fairs in India. So thank you very much, Sridhar, for agreeing to chair this session. And I hand over the reins to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Nilufar Barucha, as usual, very, very kind with words. Welcome to all on the momentous occasion of this book launch. A book launch with a slight difference. held in post-pandemic times that have shifted platforms and now gone virtual. A new mode of existence for words as pixels and images painted by light. Hope this one goes viral, of course. Having said this, some things never change. Like the August gathering for the one, with an audience few but select. We are here to launch poet Ms. Farzana Doctors. You still look the same. Though the audience here would be much familiar with both the person and their achievements and their core areas of critical concern, I would like to formally introduce her as it is an opportunity afforded by the occasion, and so we shall do so. Farzana Doctor is a writer, activist, and psychotherapist. Her ancestry is Indian, and she was born in Zambia, while her family was based there for 5 years before immigrating to Canada in 1971. She became interested in community organizing as a team, primarily environmental issues, gender violence, and LGBTQIQ rights. From 2018, she curated the Brockton Writers Series and has been a volunteer with the Writers Union of Canada and the Writers Trust. She currently volunteers with We Speak Out, a global group that's working to ban female genital cutting in a Dawoodi Bohra community. Farzana is also the Masi behind Dear Masi, a new sex and relationships column for FGM/C survivors. She co-founded the End FGM Canada network. She studied social work in the early 90s and has been a social worker ever since. She worked in a variety of community agencies and a hospital before starting part-time private practice, where she sees individuals and couples. She has been writing all her life, but it became more regular, a practice around 2000 when she began writing her first novel, Stealing Nasreen, which was published by Inanna in 2007. A second novel, 6 Meters of Payment, won a 2012 Lambda Literary Award and was shortlisted for the 2012 Toronto Book Award. In 2017, it was voted the One Book, One Brampton 2017 winner. Her third novel, All Inclusive, was a Kobo 2015 and National Post Best Book of the Year. Her fourth novel, Seven, was chosen for many 2020 Best Book lists and shortlisted for Trillium and Evergreen Awards. Her poetry collection, You Still Look the Same, which is being launched in India today, was just released in May 2022. While all her books are distinct from one another, some common themes include loss, relationships, community, healing, racism, LGBT rights, diasporic identity, and feminism. She seamlessly blends strong stories with social issues. She has just finished work on a YA novel and is editing a new self-care workbook. She is represented by Rachel Letovsky of Cook McDermott. She is an amateur tarot card reader and has a love of spirituality, energy, psychology, hypnosis, and neuroscience. She lives with a partner and dog near the lake in South Etobicoke. I don't know how to pronounce this word. Pardon my insolence in trying to do so. The traditional territory of Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat people. As regards this particular book of poems, the author would talk on that after the launch. And there is also a conversation interview and later a publisher response. As it is their prerogative to talk about it first, I shall reserve my words for my closing statement. I with humility submit at the outset that my remarks may not be consequential, but are there justly impelled by the sheer need to share with you the beauty of poetry and the words contained in the words of Farzana, doctors, you still look the same. Before I launch the book, I would like to read lines from one particular poem, which I feel befits this occasion, i.e. the book launch, and I'm doing so by deliberately mentioning the entitling of the poem last for obvious reasons. He wanted to bring a bouquet like he did the last 4 times. You launched a book, knows you adore lilies. But he is no longer the one seated beside you, clasping your damp hand, your beaded clutch on his lap. Now, at the back of the room, he claps, laughs, heartburn rising. Maybe you shouldn't have come. In his dim bedroom, he will read your lines twice over, hoping to find himself inside them. With that, it is my proud privilege to launch the book, and here is for all of us, Farzana doctors, you still look the same, and I assure you, after you read it, you will never be the same.
Still look the same. It's a poetry lecture. Let's see.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Rajeswaran. And I didn't know that you had a book of poetry out yourself, and I look forward to finding that book. Remind us the title of it so everyone can remember.
Nothing much in comparison to your work, Farzana. I now invite you, poet Farzana doctor, to throw some more light on your work and your response to the launch too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank everybody who has been involved in organizing this and taking the time to do that. So Dr. Barucha as well, Dr. Labde, and also Kirti. I just thank you so much for doing this. And I want to thank everyone who has come. I see lots of family from around the world. I see you. Thank you for being here. And I also see friends from around the world. So I really appreciate that. And it was really an honor to hear that there are some students working on my books. And if those students ever want to contact me afterwards, please feel free. I'm happy to be in conversation with you. It's always an honor when anyone reads my work, and when they study it, that's like a triple honor. So I want to just talk a little bit about how this book is structured perhaps, and why I decided to write it. And I've just noticed that my publisher has also arrived. So to the organizers, would you like to invite her to speak now or later?
Farzana, I think once you finish your response, then maybe before the interview, if she would like to speak, if she's got another commitment and would like to leave after that. So Kirti, if you can, we don't see her, but she's there.
She's
Okay.
there, yeah. So maybe I'll just go ahead and I'll talk a little bit about.
Please talk a little bit, and then when you finish, we'll ask the chair to invite your publisher to speak.
Great. Okay. So, this is my first book of poetry. I've been reading and writing poetry my whole life. I was one of those kids who enjoyed the way that poetry was taught in school. And so it became a way that I expressed myself. I often didn't know anything about the structure of poetry or how to write poetry, but I would really enjoy writing it. And while I focused most of my writing life on writing fiction, novels, I always returned to poetry while I was writing the novels, in between the novels, often to clarify what I was writing about in the novels. It was my place of play, whereas novel writing always felt just a little bit more serious and difficult. And this book is mostly poetry that I wrote or rewrote in my 40s. I'm 51 now. And the 40s were a really challenging decade for me. Some of the people who are close to me might know that I went through a breakup of a long-term relationship at the beginning of my 40s. And then I got involved in activism against FGMC, which brought up a lot of personal feelings for me that I had to work out. I moved houses during that time. I started online dating, really dating for the first time in my 40s, which, you know, has had a lot of drama attached to it, fun drama as well. And I also fell in love in my 40s all over again. So that was all happening also at a time when I was going through perimenopause, which for the people who have gone through that, you know that that's a time of lots of hormonal change and physical change, and it just added another layer of difficulty. So this was a decade of difficulty, and it inspired a lot of poems. So the poetry collection is divided into 4 sections. The first section is about losses, so breakup as well as older losses. The second section is about self-searching, you know, how do you find yourself in middle age, all over again. The third section is about working through traumas of all different kinds. And then the fourth section is about healing. And of course, those things all overlap. And I start each section with a tongue-in-cheek therapy question that is answered through a haiku. And I mention that because it's not obvious to everybody that those are haiku, but they are haiku. And what else to say about this? It's available in ebook and audiobook all over the world. And it's available in paperback in the UK, the US, and Canada. Just because of the way that book distribution happens, the ebook and the audiobook can be everywhere because it's a digital file. The audiobook was narrated by me, but mostly by a professional actor named Ulka Mohanty, and she's done a beautiful job. So check that out. That's available anywhere. And I wanted to do an audiobook of this because for some people, poetry is a little scary. Some people find poetry difficult to understand. Some of us weren't taught poetry very well. Unlike me, some people weren't taught poetry very well and so can feel quite intimidated. So I wanted to have an audio version to make it a bit more accessible. All of the poems are in a narrative or lyrical style, which I think also makes them quite accessible too. So I think that's my introduction. My publisher, Kelsey Addard from Freehand Press, I'm so grateful to that she said yes and saw the possibility in this collection before I did major edits. You know, like a lot of people, when you're putting together any manuscript, you think you're done and you start sending it off to publishers, and then it's through the process of editing it with an editor, and my editor was Sharon Paul Ruprai, that you start to really go, oh, this needs a lot of work. So I'm very thankful to her. So maybe we'll ask her to come on and say a few words.
Thank you, poet Farzana, Doctor. I now invite the publisher to say a few words on this book.
Hello. Hello everyone. Hi Farzana. I'm very honored to be joining everyone today, and my apologies for coming into the event a little late. I had another commitment this morning here in where I am. My name is Kelsey Attard. I'm the managing editor of Freehand Books, which is the publisher of Farzana's You Still Look the Same. And this morning I'm joining you from Calgary in Alberta, Canada, which is on the traditional territories of many Indigenous people, including the Siksika and the Nakota. And I needed to grab a background this morning, so for my Zoom, so you wouldn't see the the disaster behind me. So I found this one where Calgary is a wonderful place to live, not least of all because we're right beside the Rocky Mountains. So my photo right now, you can see it there, are three mountains that are known as the Three Sisters. They're just less than an hour from my house, so are very, very iconic and beautiful, and very lucky to live here for sure. So I'm with Freehand Books, an independent publisher who's devoted to publishing wonderful books by Canadian authors. And we were so very proud to have the chance to publish Farzana's collection of poetry, which speaks powerfully, and it always has through all of its iterations, the voice and the power, the strength, and the vulnerability has come through at every step in the process as well. And I think of it, it is the book of that tells the story of, the story of Farzana's 40s, but it's also a book about the realness of living, the messiness, the terribly hard things about life, and the beauty as well. One of the authors who provided a blurb for the book said that the poems here show an irrepressible desire to embrace life and love with all its complications, which I think is a pretty perfect way to sum it up. We felt such an immediate connection to these words and to the story that Farzana shares, and we're really thrilled to have the opportunity to publish it. And it's been a wonderful journey that's not over yet. We get to come to wonderful events like this and find new readers for the book, which is fantastic. Because Farzana lives in Toronto and I live in Calgary, we're on pretty much opposite ends of the country. So we haven't had a chance to meet in person yet, but one day that will change. But I've been so grateful to get to attend some events like this and readings online. And she's just wonderful, so wise, so hardworking, so gifted at sharing, a perfect turn of phrase through her poetry. I feel like every time I kind of pick up the book and flip through it, that I'm kind of caught off guard by a new line that sort of jumps out at me like, oh yes, that's what that is, which is, what poetry does, I think, in a way that that other forms of writing don't. Like, it gets very down to just a specific word or a specific line that makes all the difference in the world. So this is the first time that I've had the opportunity to attend a book launch for India, for outside of Canada, I think, for that matter, which is such a wonderful thing. So I really thank everyone for being here, for being a part of it. And if anyone does have any questions about the books or ebooks availability, if anything is not working the way it's supposed to, or it doesn't seem to be available in the way it's supposed to, please do get in touch with me, and I really will do everything possible to sort it out. We're still learning about what happens when we send these files internationally, and we don't always see it from the reader's perspective who's trying to buy one of our books in another country. So we're still learning and want to learn all that we can. So I'll maybe put my email address in the chat, and if you have anything to pass along to me, please do. It's kelsey@freehand-books.com. I'll put it in the chat here in a second. I think that's everything from me. So thank you again so much. And I hope that you have a chance to enjoy You Still Look the Same. Thank you.
We thank you, publisher Kelsey Attard of Freehand Books, and we also thank you for promising to make the book available, and thank you also for your email. Now, I would like to introduce Professor Sachin Labde, who will be in conversation and interviewing poet Farzana doctor. I've known Sachin for over 2 decades now, professionally. And in him, I see the incisive critic, the amiable scholar, the relentless activist, a committed teacher, and of course, a great human being. Sachin Labde has a PhD, MPhil, and MA in English, and has 20 years of teaching experience in English literary and linguistic studies. He is presently working as associate professor at the Department of English, University of Mumbai. He is recognized as a research guide by the University of Mumbai, and his present research interests include queer studies, South Asian Englishes, English language pedagogy, and contact languages. He is a recipient of 2 international fellowships and 1 international grant. He is young, so he has a long way to go, and many more awards are actually waiting. He has presented research papers at several national and international conferences and has published research papers in reputed journals. He recently translated a storybook in Marathi and has co-authored a chapter on English in India in Modeling World Englishes, a joint approach towards post-colonial and non-post-colonial varieties. At present, he is contributing to the world literature section of the Marathi Encyclopedia of Marathi Vishwakosh Nimitti Mandal, Government of Maharashtra. Besides, he coordinates the University of Mumbai's Indo-Canadian Studies Centre, as well as Shastri's Indo-Canadian Institutes University Centre. Now, for that sacrosanct relationship between poet and interviewer, and over to you, Sachin and Dr. Farzana doctor.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your very elaborate and generous introduction. In fact, this is, it's a day of celebration for Farzana doctor, and I would have loved to hear more about her. But thank you very much for all your words and words of appreciation. It makes me feel young, the way you introduced me. And it probably what matters is this kind of praise and compliment. Well, it indeed is a pleasure, again getting in touch with Farzana, because we had this very interesting conference, and we were literally, nagging her like constantly after her for the interview, and she was so wonderful. She was so kind to give all the time that she could give. Besides, and despite the busy schedule that she had, I still remember, those moments that we had with you and the interview that we had. We cherish those moments, and I'm glad that we are back and we are going to have another round of, interaction with you. So I'm quite excited to be here and to be in conversation with her. Yesterday, we just, playfully said that, this coffee with Farzana, and she was kind enough to say, Sachin, one day we will really meet in person and have coffee and have interaction. So I keep my fingers crossed, Farzana, but for the time being, we'll have this virtual coffee date, and let's see. Well, so honestly speaking, when I was in my early 20s, I made a few disastrous attempts at forcing some poetry out of my pen. But then I realized that, it is not really my cup of milk. However, I continue to develop a sense of appreciation for poetry. And what intrigued me since then is how a poet is able to produce something beautiful, something which outlives the immediate context. That triggered, the kind of production. And here I am today meeting a celebrated and award-winning Canadian author and a wonderful human being, Farzana doctor. So, Farzana, first of all, let me congratulate you on this very successful launch and welcome to this brief rendezvous with you. I am sure that you must have had a wonderful journey uh, mixed with, say, excitement, fun, thrill, and also some pain and some anxiety when you are going through the process of producing this book. So how are you feeling right now about the book as it is out now?
Thank
So
you
this
so
is
much.
something, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for all those lovely words. I'm really pleased that it's out. I was nervous at first because, you know, while I feel very confident about my novel writing because I have 4 of those out. This is my first poetry collection, so I felt kind of like a beginner again. And certainly I had to do a lot of work. I was mentioning earlier, just in really learning how to edit the poems, how to create flow with this collection so that it made sense. And that was a learning curve for me. I worked very hard to figure out those things. So it was like I was a student again in writing, which is really good, right? I think it's important in any kind of career to try something new, to try to build your skills. But I'm very pleased that it's out. It's probably my most vulnerable piece of work because with fiction, there's a kind of containability with fiction. You are making things up. You are creating characters that are not you. And while you're maybe pulling from your own life, you are writing someone else's life. But with poetry, while not every poem is necessarily about me, and some of the poems begin with me, and then I hope branch out into something more universal, it's far more unwieldy. It's not as contained, and it is more vulnerable. People will see much more of my heart in this book than in any of my previous books.
Yeah, and in fact, you know, when I was reading through the reviews of the book, uh, these were so encouraging, and you know, I constantly had this feeling that, you know, you have actually brought something very beautiful, something, you know, people always wanted to read and associate with, because there was this sense of, you know, association. There was this sense of relating to it. So it's amazing, and I'm sure, you know, more and more readers would find it quite relatable sort of experience. And the way you have used the language, it's so beautiful. I'm going to get back to you on that because I am quite intrigued by your combinations, and we'll catch up on that. You know, when I was spreading this word around about the event, uh, like me, some of my friends and colleagues' first reaction was, wow, this is an interesting title. You know, you look still, you know, you still look the same. It's something that, especially when, you know, given the location from which you speak as a writer, as a poet, this is quite intriguing. While one keeps being constantly othered and bothered for their race, for their gender, for their religion, class, caste, age, this title of your book offers a relief. You know, so would you like to tell us something about what went into making of this title? Was it, you know, solely your decision, or your publisher sort of, you know, kind of suggested that you make these changes? I'm deliberately bringing the publisher in because since we are students of literature, we do know that publishers play a lot of role. They influence the decisions of the writer. So I'd like to know from you, how was this journey of the title?
Yeah, I think I already had this title when I submitted the manuscript, but publishers do have a role to play. You know, my previous book, my novel, was it's called Seven, but it was originally called Four Wives, and we had to scrap that title because in that same year there was a very successful Canadian novel called Five Wives. So You just, you have to pay attention to what's happening in the literary world around you. So this title was already in my mind, and the way that a lot of authors find their titles is, you go through your whole manuscript and you look for phrases, and in this case, you look for poetry titles, perhaps, or parts of the poems that kind of jump out. And this title has to do with, you still look the same, you maybe haven't changed in some ways, or have you? But also it's about how we perceive, how we look at things. The poem that this is titled after is about the story of a childhood friend who went through an experience of bullying with me when we were in grade 2 and grade 3. And, we drifted apart because her family moved away, and then Facebook reunited us, and then we met to talk, and she shared some memories that were very salient. Like, there are things that we just remember from when we're 7 or 8, right? And she had some memories of us together, and they were so different. There were things that she remembered that I didn't remember, and things that I remembered that she remembered. And so that's what that poem, I guess, is about. She's also somebody who died too young in a terrible accident a couple of years ago. And so there's also something about just the role that she played in my life. She arrived, disappeared, came back, disappeared. But we were there for each other in our childhoods, in our experiences of bullying. So yeah, so I think because of that experience of her and how salient that was sort of how the title really came forward for me.
Thank you. In fact, it was very different from what I was expecting, or more than expecting, what I was imagining it to be. But it's really good to know the kind of experience that you shared with us, and the very history behind this title. It's amazing.
And imagination, I just want to say that's one of the beautiful things about poems, right? Like sometimes you're going to know exactly what the poet is talking about, and sometimes not at all, right?
Yes.
But then we sort of we have to move into our own imaginations, our own experiences, and hopefully the poem takes us to a new understanding of ourselves somehow in the process. So I like that you imagine something else.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of your poetry. Or in fact, I feel that any poem is beautiful because it allows you, a new way of imagining things. I mean, you don't really have to stick to the writer's version of it. So I'm sure the readers, when they get back to these poems will reveal a new world or new, say, reality for them. Wow. So again, like, since I also had a chance of interacting with you, going through your work, this is what I personally wanted to know from you. This is from my experience that a while ago you were talking about seeing Dr. Nilofer Bharucha in 2 different boxes, and then she said, yes, I'm 2 personalities. But that is precisely my point when I actually thought of asking you about this, because I'm quite curious, and many people like me might be equally curious about this, that you're partly a psychotherapist, you're partly a social activist. Please don't mind my use of word partly. You might be fully, into this, mission of social activism, which I have seen through your work and your interaction. And you're also a creative writer. So what I'd like to know is if the poet Farzana had any conflict with the psychotherapist Farzana or with activist Farzana while she was trying to, produce these poems or create these poems. Just a silly question, please don't mind.
That's a very interesting question. I think that, we are parts of everything. We're multiple of everything. We're intersectional. Like, there are so many aspects to us, right now I'm sitting here being poet Farzana, but, later on, I'm bad cook Farzana, you know, or I'm partner Farzana, or I'm dog person Farzana. So we are multiples always. And the way that I think of my life, you know, I like to structure my day. So my mornings are devoted to my writing life, my afternoon to being a therapist, and then the activism just kind of comes in between. But how I think is informed by all of these aspects. So, you know, people will see in this and probably my other books, the ways that my psychotherapist self has come through. I've been a psychotherapist or in this field of mental health for over 30 years now. And so I think I just think in psychobabble. It's just unfortunate and fortunate, but that's just how I think. And I've been an activist since I was a teenager, you know, always just so angry at all the injustice in the world. I'm still angry, maybe in a different kind of way. But so I think about social justice. I write about social justice. I do when I'm writing, though, I try to put on my writer hat first, even if I'm writing about psychotherapy or if I'm writing about social justice, because I want to make sure that the words are beautiful, that I'm not just kind of on a, you know, I'm not just lecturing or scolding, or, you know what I mean? Like I want to be helping the world. I want people to think more deeply. And so that has to come in an artistic way. And so I really try to put on that artistic hat when I'm doing this kind of work. So that if there's any kind of conflict, it's about like my writer self saying, no, don't do that. Let's find a better way to do this. So that would be my only conflict, probably.
Cool. I mean, it's probably something that young budding writers and poets also should, you know, think about. I'm glad that, you know, you put the poet in you on top of everything, and, you know, the therapist can wait, or the social activist can wait. I like what you said, you know, that you were actually angry, you know, angry about many things, and you wanted to take that anger out. But what is very intriguing about your poetry, especially, you know, like since it's your debut collection, you actually touched upon very serious issues, but the tone that you have, it's light-hearted. You know, you actually bring in the wit, you bring in those humorous moments. So this is intriguing. How did you think of, you know, combining these two? It's a deadly combination, that you are angry and you are dealing with very serious issues, but at the same time you have, you know, this wit and light manner to present this in the form of poetry. So could you tell us more about that?
Yes, I also think that, you know, life is very funny. People are very funny, and it's something I have tried to do from the very beginning with my very first book. I remember reading Zadie Smith, White Teeth, back in the day when it first came out. And I think it was around the time that I was writing my first novel. And I really admired how there was this beautiful combination in her work that is, you know, serious stuff, but also super funny, you know, and there's a way that when we're laughing along with really hard issues, I think we're able to perhaps absorb them, absorb the ideas. So I really like to just laugh in my own life. I like humor in writing. I find it just brings me much more pleasure in the reading. So yeah, and thank you for picking up on the funny in all of this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in fact, you know, it did remind me of, you know, some of those artists who really did this, you know, and it's one of the toughest tasks I personally feel, is to kind of, you know, bring this kind of lightheartedness and to bring wit to things which are of serious, you know, concern. And it's amazing to see the way you have kind of shaped your words in that manner and offer it to the readers. In fact, when I was reading some of the reviews, this is precisely what, you know, appealed to many readers, that they really enjoyed the way you've kind of, you know, worded these experiences. So it's really amazing, and this actually bring me to the next very question which I have been intrigued and I wanted to know from you. You did talk about it a bit in the beginning, but still I thought, I'll need a little more. I might force you to speak a little more on that. Is that since this is your debut collection, I am eager to know how you dealt with the form of poetry. Did you really have to struggle in choosing specific forms? At times, you did mention that you used haiku, but also your poems do not really have a kind of, one form, one structure as such. So this must have been, amazing experience. So could you tell us about that?
Yes, there's only a few poems where I had a constraint, like the haiku, and then there's a shape poem, and it's called after poems, where you try to write in a form of another poet. So I have an after Rumi poem, but yes, all the others are fairly free form. So where I had to really work was in editing, and it's sort of similar to writing novels as well, like looking at, can I show this better instead of telling? Where do the line breaks happen? Where do I want to have interesting spaces in the middle of a line so that a reader will pause just a little bit? How do I bring emphasis to something? There was also editing decisions in terms of places where I was writing about a memory where someone was still alive, and did I want to protect them a little bit or be a little bit cautious? So there's a couple of poems, for example, where my sister or my father are mentioned, and I was just really careful that I wouldn't offend or perhaps hurt, as an example. There's some breakup poems where I thought about, well, I better be writing really from my own point of view. I don't want to assume anything about the other person, because that just, why bring drama to your life? The collection is actually dedicated to people in my family. So it's, for my mother, Banu, my father, Shamun, my sister, Faria, my first true loves. And that was really intentional, because there are some early lost poems in there that, are really just about them. It's about my mother's loss. So those were editing decisions of a kind. But really, I worked very hard with my editor, Sharon Paul Ruprai. Her critiques really helped me, where she would be like, what are you trying to say here? What was the point of this poem? Sometimes she was a little harsh. And then once I had finished working with her and I felt like, okay, I have a final draft, I also hired another editor to just take a final look with fresh eyes to let me know. And I got some more ideas. So, we often need help with editing as well.
Great. I mean, and but like when I look at this with the kind of variety that you have of the form, it actually becomes a sort of reflection of how we look at life. Like we Indians believe, the spices, like there has to be variety, and variety is the spice of life. So I can see that variety, that spicy thing in your attempt, trying different forms in this book. It's amazing. So so this while I was also kind of going through some of the reviews, I found that that you mentioned also earlier when you were talking about the book, that the book is available in audio form and it's available in e-form. So especially the audio part of it, where like you in fact read some of the poems, and there was a professional voiceover artist, Mohanty, that you mentioned. So I really want to take this opportunity to request you to, probably pick up some, one or two poems, or like your choice, and read it for us so that we can hear the voice of the author. If you may, I mean, like if that is not too much of
I
a
would love to.
demand.
Do you have any requests, or should I just pick one?
I would rather want you to choose from your collection or your.
Okay, let me read one called Fall Back. So this has to do with daylight savings, you know. We fall back and we spring forward. This one is called Fall Back. And it's one of my favorites because someone asked me, what are some of your favorite poems? And I asked another poet, how do you decide what is a favorite poem? And he said, the way I decide is the one that still makes me tear up, even though I wrote it a long time ago. I rewrote it and edited and revised it, and I've read it a million times, but it still makes me tear up. So I'm going to do this one. It's called Fall Back. Daylight savings, you say, let's see 2 a.m. twice. Shut down the club, you and me and all of humanity, sweating gratitude onto beer-drenched floors. My head aches, limbs leaden. Can't I just have an extra hour of sleep? With wide eyes, goading grin, you ask, but what if this hour is a silver locket holding every shiny wish? I close my eyes, think, any wish? I'd sit hip to hip with mom on a park bench, show her all my Girl Guide badges, read my valedictorian speech, offer a tour of my garden. I'd ask her if it's true. She visits me in dreams, flickers overhead lamps, leaves me coins, feathers, played matchmaker, so I trust love again. I'd beg a slideshow, her 38 years alive, 11 when she was mine, color and outlines, memories long faded. I'd press her for stories, her final 40 minutes, the 40 days after, and the 40 years since. I'd use every expansive second, seek her advice, capture every detail, hold her hand, for by the end of the hour, she'd be gone. Thank you.
Lovely.
This year is actually the 40th anniversary of her death, in about a week and a half. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Though I feel tempted to continue this dialogue with you, I have to resist this temptation. And I'd like to end with a very insightful remark by one of the reviewers of this book, Shauna Baldwin. Probably you must have read what she said, who says, and I quote, that Farzana Doctor offers us distilled insights garbed in spare, heart-opening language. Each poem a question to be deepened by rereading. I wish all readers a similar experience. I would like to close this by taking one promise from you, Farzana, that you will allow us to have another rendezvous with you, and probably we get more students to interact with you. So if you promise me, I will not hold everyone for ransom. So let's
100%.
Yeah.
I hope to be able to visit India soon one day.
Thank you very much. Now, so thank you very much, Farzana. It was such a pleasure, and hope to get back to you again on this. So I now hand over the bearings of this session to the headmaster, the chair of this session, Dr. Sridhar.
Thank you, Professor Sachin, and thank you, Farzana, for a very, very edifying, exhilarating experience to listen to a poet talk about a work and certain pointed questions being asked, which unconceals the body of work rather very interestingly in multiple ways. There is some time allotted for observations and questions. And I hand over the platform to Kirti Risgood, MMIAS Research Associate, and our own technically savvy computer geek. So it is over to you, Kirti, to go through these question, answers, observations, and suggestions and inputs from the audience. Dear Kirti,
Yeah,
are you there?
I'm here. Yes, yes. So we have Balraj here. Before Balraj, there is Umita, who's thanked you, and we are very sorry for your loss. Balraj says, congratulations for the launch of your poetry collection. And because of some technical glitch, he's not able to communicate. But after listening to this engaging and warm conversation, she and all of us are looking forward to reading your poems more. And she wants to know, after writing novels and poems, are you contemplating writing plays?
Thank you for the question. So as a kid, I used to write plays and make my family watch them. I think they were probably terrible. Then as a young adult, I was part of a South Asian poetry or theater collective. And we co-wrote plays that we performed together, mostly on social justice issues. So I have done a little bit of that. And, you know, inshallah, life is long, and I'll get an opportunity to keep branching out. I have noticed with my writing that after writing 4 novels, I have been curious about branching out. So I've got this poetry book, and I've got a self-care manual that I'm writing. And so who knows, I think I might return to writing plays one day as well. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. We have some more. Salima wants to know, please give us an after poem from the collection.
Okay, this one is a short one, so that's good. It's a Rumi poem. Just give me 1 second. I need to find it. It's page 31 in case anyone is following along. So this is called After Rumi's Who Makes These Changes, in case anyone has read that Rumi poem. And thank you, Salima, for this request. Salima Valyani is a poet herself, a very accomplished poem herself. After Rumi's Who Makes These Changes. Who makes these changes? I speak 1,000 words, the wrong one echoes. I run after affection and find myself chased by a ghost. I invite everybody, no one RSVPs. I cook lavish meals for dozens and eat alone. I should be suspicious of what I want. So after this, go out and look up Rumi's Who Makes These Changes so you can do the comparison.
Thank you. We have from Rashida, Farzana, you're a writer and a poet. Is there anything else you're doing while you write, like doodle or sketch, something we may not have seen yet?
So thank you. This is my Masi, Rashida. So just another shout out to my family from all over the world who are here. Thank you for being here. So I do a lot of doodling, actually. One of the things that has been very interesting in working with Zoom versus in person is that doodling does help me think a lot. I've never considered myself a visual artist. I've never had that training. But, you know, like I said before, I hope that life is long. And, you know, I think artists often do cross over. I was also part of a video collective, and I just love it, right? I love all of these things. So perhaps when there's some time, I'll get myself a little training in that. But there's nothing for you to see yet because it's all just stuff that I throw away. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think these are the questions, but I suppose since we are a small group, if somebody wants to unmute and talk to you directly.
Yes, please feel free.
Farzana. I'm wondering whether you're writing poetry now, in this sort of, I know you've been doing it a long time, you said, but that you've worked on it for a while now, whether you anticipate it affecting how you approach your fiction, how it might influence that, and also, and you can decide which one to answer, whether your process in writing was similar or different, how you approach poetry, how you approach fiction in terms of just getting started, revising, editing, whether those two ended up being different or similar. So two very different questions, I know.
Where did the, I didn't see who was talking. It didn't show up on.
Oh, sorry. It's Umita and from Champaign, Illinois.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I think, the more we write, the more we practice writing. And so I think that everything we write influences something else. I think, with poetry, you really learn how to be concise, to be very deliberate in every single word choice. There were places where I was thinking about whether even a preposition should have been there or not, on that kind of level of detail and tediousness. So I think that probably it'll make my fiction just a little bit more crisp, and maybe it has already done that. I am a fiction writer who writes, I revise. There might be 12 drafts before it's ready to be sent to a publisher. And I think I'm always kind of looking at the sentences and paring down. So I think both have influenced each other. And what was the second part of your question? It just dropped away.
Whether, I know there were two one was whether your process in terms of how you go about things, but I think you sort of addressed that a little bit, and whether you imagine, and I think you're talking about this too, whether your poetry writing is, how you imagine affecting your fiction writing, but you say that they really do, they do work together. And I totally know what you mean about how poetry makes you pay attention to words and how, and also it's spare in a way that's different from fiction. And so, it probably changes the discipline of your, as you edit your sentences in fiction. So those were, I was interested. I'm always interested in writers' processes. And so hearing you talk about that and about the revision is very interesting. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes,
And this collection sounds, I'm so looking forward to getting a copy. So thank you.
Farzana, we're so happy to see you, and we just love you.
Is that
Like,
Tara?
honestly, we love you.
Thank you. Thank you for all of your support and for being here today.
Kirti, is there anybody else who would like to say anything?
There's nothing in the chat box.
Okay, I thank each and every one of you. Now it's the time allotted to me to say a few words about this work. In my opening remarks, I had said, and I quote, "I with humility submit at the outset that my remarks may not be consequential, but are there justly impelled by the sheer need to share with you the beauty of poetry and the worlds contained in the works of Farzana doctors. You still look the same." In whatever vein it is put, poetry is serious business. Its remarks in Per Amica Silentia Lunae that we make out of the quarrel with others rhetoric, but of the quarrel with ourselves poetry. As the sad shepherd he wrote, "Words alone are a certain good. Sing them, for this is also soup." Auden reiterates this in his memory of W.B. Yeats. Poetry survives in the valley of its making, where executives would never want to tamper. flows on south from ranches of isolation and the busy greaves, wrought towns that we believe and die in. It survives a way of happening, a mouth. In a similar vein, Farzana doctors through her work, You Still Look the Same, seriously lives purposes to some of the highest ideals of Shelley's poets or the unacknowledged legislators of the world. Having said this, art is, call it an imitation or reflection or a dynamic, continual, or a first order dialectical engagement. It's a product of the ethos and the constitutive conditions of dwelling and existence in particular spatio-temporal realities. And these give rise to its form and content, its aesthetic conception, and its inseparable other, the aesthetic achievement. The former, the ideas that go into it, and the latter, the structures used to enunciate them. The language in Farzana doctor's poetry thus is contemporary, and the content in general and in particularities of shared concerns of our times and for our times. Pardon my insolence as this is arrived through a mere reading of her work, and I'm sure a study, a deeper study, will reveal a lot more that exists crystalline, contained in unique consciousness that runs the entire gamut of moist, female, feminine, and feminist takes, covering the biological, cultural, and political spaces through which she blacks open the continuum of deep cartographies on the bodies of women, making the personal political. Having said this, there is also the Emersonian ambiguity as regards sexuality that has no fixed gender markers, serving a floating signifier at times to offer open and endless possibilities depending on the connects made at the context of reception. Thus, significations that when you think you've arrested them, escape the sieve to mean multiple things for multiple people with different sexual views, beliefs, and preferences, in short, to wide ranges and cross-sections as poetry is meant to do, and this it does. They exist in an evolving tension as you progress through our poems. There is the self, there is art and craft, which in their togetherness voice a must read. One sees the truthful sensitivity of Elizabeth Barrett, her simplicity as enshrined in her sonnets from the Portuguese, How Do I Love Thee, Let Me Count the Days, as well as its evidence, the pace of Sylvia Plath's confectional voice, the fret and fever when life-sustaining water makes you wretch, Fever 103, all made available within the said and the unsaid silences in between gaps, words, lines, structures, commas, punctuations, question marks, and style. All overseen by many other great shadows that lurk as inspirations and are modified in the guts of the living Farzana doctor. The sheer power of words, as in Lost in Breakup, potholes gifted to us, charred from being left on a crimson burner the day you moved out. The entire top floor of house disappeared. I still hear your footsteps overhead. Well, memories of another day. Solitude of pleas like toes, testing an eroding cliff, and radio voices where hers used to be. And then on to her as I ash my bedtime cigarette. Do they see me inhaling the night? The old feathered duvet fits your new bed. Maggie leaped up, rumpled sheets. It wasn't me. Recollections, reviews, reassertions, reflections. After the solitude and the breakup, and after the hurt and grief, the after of nostalgia, of lost times, of failed therapies, of therapies that did not fail, the healing, the question, the healing, the question, fresh air, balm, and bandages for burns, a season of recovery, and the questioning. If help had arrived in nick of time to rescue us from the burned out home, question mark. If these are beginnings of a journey, she in her dreams finds tropical fish swim just beneath the skin's surface, sees the ocean in her limbs and the sky in her vein, all perhaps realized through a spy hole in an aquarium or into an aquarium. There are other places too you can find her, as she's never alone, ever present in a bookshelf that holds mentors, every closet cupboard filled with friends, and a new one which says, you still look the same. The word look is a loaded term with multiple denotations and connotations. I reiterate, I find Farzana's doctor's work a must read. And on that note, I thank Professor Niloufar Bharucha and MMIAS, Mumbai, Münster, Institute of Advanced Studies, International and Interdisciplinary, for the opportunity and hand over the platform to Kirti Tejas Viswood, Research Associate of MMIAS, herself a future doctor, writer, and professor in waiting. Thank you, Kirti. It's over to you.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. And I really appreciate you looking so carefully at my work and for that beautiful medley. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm humbled.
Very touched.
Thank you, Professor Sridhar. I don't know about me being a future doctor, but right now I'm very glad. Thank you so much, Ms. Doctor, for choosing to launch your India, choosing us to launch the India version. And thank you so much. I would like to thank our Vice Chancellor who has sent his best wishes. He couldn't be there today, but he has always been supportive of our activities. So thank you, sir. Our Pro Vice Chancellor, who again is very supportive of what we do at the MMIAS. Our collaborator, Dr. Sachin Labde, and the Indo-Canadian Studies Centre. Thank you so much for being with us today and your wonderful interview with Ms. Doctor today. Thank you. Our university's computer center that sets up the Zoom link, and today it was out of their hours of work, but they still managed to set it up in time, and they have given all the technical support that we required today. So thank you, Prasad. Last but not the least, all our participants who have joined us from all over the world today. Thank you so much for being here, for Ms. Doctor, for us. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
A huge thank you to everyone. I really appreciate you doing this for me today, and I hope we get to meet in person soon.
Thank you, Farzana. Thank you, everyone who is here today. Thank you, Sridhar, for coming in at the end hour and supporting us and giving us this wonderful conclusion. And I could see that Farzana was quite struck, I think, and it's always good for a poet. It's wonderful, I think, for any writer to have her work analyzed. We literature guys do it behind the writer's backs usually. We rarely have the writer in front of us. So this is an unusual thing for us as well. So thank you very much. And if there is nobody who wants to say anything at all,
I would just want to apologize for missing out on Professor Sridhar. Thank you for chairing this session today at the, as Professor Bharucha said.
Don't bother, don't bother.
No, I have to do this. Thank you.